Hopefully that works. Welcome, everybody. I'll let one more microphone.
Thank you.
So, we often get the best ideas from listening to the people of Colorado, and that's a fundamental part of the job of our state representatives, our state senators, us as governor, and we have an unprecedented opportunity. Thanks to our federal delegation, United States Congress, I want to thank Senator Bennett, Senator Hickenlooper. There is a $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. And how we choose to invest the Colorado part of that, both the part that comes through the state, the part that goes through local governments, the part that goes through state agencies, will really help determine how rapid and successful our recovery is. It's an amazing opportunity. And with that opportunity comes the responsibility of getting it right. And today we're announcing a tour of the state, both virtual and in person, to really listen to the voices of Colorado's hardest hit sectors, the regions across Colorado, to, in a bipartisan, bicameral way, listen, gather ideas, so that we can wisely utilize these one-time funds over the next couple of years to build a strong economy, good jobs, needed infrastructure that meets the needs of our state. And we, of course, are going to be connecting virtually for many of these regional breakout sessions, both because of the pandemic, but also because many of our legislators are here working, and we want to make it easier to attend these meetings. We'll be doing regional breakout sessions across the state, including one for Eastern Plains, Northern Colorado, the Western Slope, Colorado Springs, Pueblo and Southern Colorado, Four Corners area, and Denver Metro North and Denver Metro South. So we'll hear regionally about needs from local small businesses, from local elected officials on the ground who know their communities well, members of city councils, commissioners, and others. We'll also be listening to how different sectors have been impacted by the pandemic and how we can help them build back stronger. Sectors like healthcare and agriculture and tech and many others. And the goal is really to ensure that every meeting has a diverse group of voices. This invaluable feedback will help shape the decisions that Colorado's elected officials make. The first meeting is set for March 28th for Southern Colorado, Pueblo and Southern Colorado. We look forward to hearing from folks in Southern Colorado. And look, Colorado is home to some of the fastest growing industries in the nation, a home away from home for millions of tourists from across the world. And throughout this tour, we hope to better inform the decisions that we make to provide a roadmap for recovery. A roadmap forward for those who have been held back for far too long. Jump-starting new vehicles for workforce training, for grants, for loans, for infrastructure, for assistance for businesses, and so much more. We really look forward to hearing great ideas from the left, the right, and the middle, from the northwest, the northeast, the southeast, and the southwest, and the middle of the state, because we are truly have the best ideas when we listen. Every single Coloradan has shown tremendous strength this past year. And thanks to, in part, to the American Rescue Plan, along with our state stimulus that we signed the first several bills of this last weekend. We signed the bill investing in state parks. We signed the Main Street revitalization through Department of Transportation. We signed the Firehawk and fire mitigation bills. These are some of the first steps of building back stronger, and we look forward to working with Republicans and Democrats in the legislature to get even more done. So thank you for joining us. We convey to the people of Colorado, we're here to listen. We look forward to doing a lot of listening in the coming weeks, and I'll turn it over to our Senate President, Leroy Garcia.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor Polis. I'm proud to be here to talk to you about the American Rescue Act, which will help us build this bridge to the other side of this pandemic. Coloradans have experienced profound devastation over the last year as families have lost their jobs and businesses have shuttered their doors. But the American Rescue Funds, along with our own Colorado Recovery Package, will be able to lift up our communities and deliver the relief necessary to rebuild what has been broken. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every part of the state, but as a sixth-generation Southern Coloradan, I know that our rural communities and agricultural industries have had to face more than their fair share of the challenges. So it's time that we lead by listening. Through this tour, we will be gathering input from all corners of the state to ensure that the Colorado Comeback includes every community, big or small, because Colorado way of life depends on rural constituents and ensuring that these industries are thriving. This opportunity will allow us to collaborate with our partners in rural areas of the state and strategize relief plans in a way that adequately responds to the unique market forces straining our producers and rural businesses. Together, all voices will be at the table with every experience and every perspective being represented. We'll be able to ensure that every city and every town across Colorado has the resources they need to build back stronger. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, President Garcia and Governor, for your comments. This really reflects the latest in the collaboration that you have seen from the legislative branch and the executive branch to put first and foremost building back Colorado stronger first. I want to thank the legislative leaders that are here from both sides of the aisle. 2 weeks ago, we stood before you and we announced state stimulus to get dollars into corners of the state that were not going to receive federal stimulus dollars. Today, we are announcing the listening tour to best understand how to move those federal stimulus dollars to help Colorado bounce back faster and stronger than before. The best advice that I give legislative leaders as they come into this building is the number one attribute that you have to have is the ability to listen. And that's what this roadshow is going to be all about. It's about transparency. It's about getting into every region of the state. Colorado is one of the most regionally diverse states in the country, and making sure that we take the time to hear from our local leaders on where these dollars should go is time well spent. It's going to help advise us on how to move those dollars. And again, this is a collaboration between the legislative branch and the executive branch on how best to use the dollars that are coming from the federal government because of the bill the president signed nearly a week and a half ago. We're still waiting on guidance, and that is something that we'll have to take into consideration. But we wanted to make sure we started this listening tour first. And with that, I want to introduce and welcome Minority Leader Holbert to give some remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was wonderful to be together at the Governor's Mansion to express bipartisan and bicameral support for the state stimulus. It was also an opportunity to talk about the unique opportunity that we have as legislators working with the executive branch to think more strategically and have strategic discussions. So often what we do is just run bills and see if they pass or not. This kind of strategic thinking, you'll see evidence in a bill, for instance, from our caucus. Senator Rob Woodward is working on relief to state and local tax deductions. And I think you'll see a bipartisan effort. And that could literally save or reward Colorado businesses $2 billion or more. Please talk to Senator Woodward about that. But that's so encouraging to see ideas like this. This listening tour is why we're here today. This is an exciting opportunity to expand that discussion beyond just legislators and the governor, but to include county commissioners, town and city council members, maybe even school boards, elected officials at the local, municipal, and county levels to give us their feedback as to how these federal dollars can best be used to get Colorado back to work, kids back to school, and build roads and bridges. I think that's exciting. Maybe it's unique, unusual to see Democrats and Republicans standing together, the legislative branch and the executive branch, but these are unique times here in Colorado, and they require unique ways to address these situations, and I think that's what you can see here today. With that, I'd like to introduce the representative to the Joint Budget Committee for the Senate Republican Caucus. Please welcome Senator Bob Rankin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. This is indeed a unique opportunity, and it comes on top of a major state stimulus program that we just talked about a couple of weeks ago, and on top of an improving state revenue budget. So we clearly have work to do to wisely spend dollars. And I think we should remember that there's a lot of the rescue plan dollars will go directly to states and counties. So we'll be looking for partnerships where we can leverage both those direct contributions and state money for things that build our infrastructure, but also put us in a sound footing for the years to come. So thank you for being with us, and we look forward to this, this listening tour.
And next up will be Majority Leader Fenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The American Recovery Plan is clearly a once-in-a-generation opportunity that we have here to make large-scale investments in every sector of our economy and in every corner of our state. It will allow us to address some of our deepest wounds from the pandemic and chart a course forward that looks towards long-lasting success. But we're not going to make these major decisions in a vacuum. We know that the best solutions are going to come from the experts, and those experts are the people of Colorado. These are the folks that we're going to talk to that are still feeling the negative impacts of this pandemic, and also those who are ready to roll up their sleeves and build back stronger. That's why we will be speaking to not only 7 different regions around the state, but also 9 different disproportionately impacted sectors of our economy and different constituent groups. One key group being Colorado's business community, which we all know has suffered greatly over this last year. So, like our state stimulus package, we'll be putting an emphasis on finding solutions for small businesses and the unique challenges they all are facing throughout the state of Colorado. Our recovery relies on us uplifting these businesses that often serve as critical community pillars across the state. So before we craft our recovery plan, we're looking to you, not just for feedback, but for input, for collaboration, and for inspiration. Because we are a community in Colorado, and if we come together, we can not only imagine a stronger future, but we can build one. Now I'd like to hand it over to Majority Leader Danae Estar.
Thank you, Majority Leader. As a representative from Southern Colorado, many of you know a big part of my job is always ensuring that the voices of my friends, neighbors, and constituents are heard and understood here in Denver. Every week, rain, snow, or hail, I drive up from Pueblo, knowing that I'll have to fight hard to make sure that Southern Colorado's perspective is heard and respected in this building. No offense to my wonderful Metro Denver colleagues, but I know that lawmakers from the Western Slope, Northern Colorado, and the Eastern Plains feel exactly the way I do. We want to make sure that we are listening, and that's why I'm so excited that through this listening tour, we'll be taking the state capitol to the people, to hear directly from the workers, the educators, small business owners, farmers, ranchers, employers, and other Coloradans who are looking to support. By listening to them and taking their lead, I'm confident we'll find many ways to channel federal funds into local economies and truly build back a stronger Colorado. We may not physically be traveling around the state at this time, but dividing the state up by region as well as by sectors and making sure that every part of our vast and diverse state gets its own focused listening session and exactly what we need to hear to make sure Colorado gets the most out of this federal stimulus. And of course, what better place to virtually start this tour than the home of heroes? I'm especially excited, the governor announced that the first 2 stops will actually be in Pueblo and Grand Junction. With that, I will turn it over to our treasurer, Dave Young.
And thank you, Madam Majority Leader, and the other legislative leaders that are here today. And thank you, Governor, for initiating this tour. It's most important and vital that we do the work that you're announcing today. We have an opportunity to move forward out of the concurrent health and economic crises brought on by like COVID-19 and help those in our state who have been most impacted. As treasurer, I've been working for over 2 years to implement programs and work across the state to empower individuals to work towards financial health. For decades, there have been roadblocks to this goal, which have been compounded by COVID-19. Federal stimulus dollars will help to dismantle the roadblocks to financial health. On this path towards a stronger economy, I have been working on Climber Loan Program, a statewide loan program providing up to $250 million in capital to Colorado small businesses over the next 2 years. This program is designed to catalyze loans that would not otherwise be given and at below market rates for favorable terms to business owners. I've also been working to build the Colorado Secure Savings Program, a robust retirement savings program that could impact over 900,000 Colorado workers. This program will empower individuals to save for the future and for future unforeseen emergencies. It's crucial as we develop these programs and we allocate these funds that are coming, that we center these decisions on the needs of Coloradans. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to hear directly from the people around the state and look forward to using the input of Coloradans to make strategic fiscal decisions. With that, questions? Yes.
The OFPB forecast last Friday said that out of the $27 billion that Colorado is slated to get from the American Rescue Plan, about $6 billion of it would go to state and local governments. What's the amount that we're talking about here? And I'm assuming that there's also going to be additional dollars involved in these discussions that were over and above the $700 million that came out in that revenue forecast last Friday.
Perhaps we'll let the governor field that since you're referring to his Office of State Planning and Budgeting.
So there are, and I'll let the JBC address this as well, but there are many different pots of money, some of it flows local government, state government, school districts, higher ed, state agencies. This listening session will be informative for the disposition of all the different forms of aid, but of course will be targeted around the most flexible money, the state aid, which is still going to be subject to forthcoming guidance around its uses. Does anybody else want to address that?
Thank you for the question. So, on Friday, the Joint Budget Committee received economic and revenue forecasts from both the Office of State Planning and Budgeting and Legislative Council. What was shocking to me is how closely related those forecasts were. That was the first time I've seen two different economists from two different agencies agreeing on the positive outlook for the Colorado economy, to the tune of upgrading their forecasts in comparison to December by about $500 million. That is huge for this state. I think it's safe to say that no other legislature will have the opportunity that we do in front of us right now. $3.9 billion. It is exciting, and that's why I'm grateful that we are embarking on this listening tour, because this type of investment needs to reflect the priorities and the values of the entire state. And I think that is what we are hoping to solicit through this process. As it relates to local government funding, that will be distributed on a per capita basis based on population. So our local governments, our counties, our cities, will also receive assistance to respond to the COVID emergency in their own way as well. And so really just an incredible opportunity, the entire package injecting as much money as our annual state budget into the Colorado economy between the business support, the unemployment benefits, everything else included in that package. It's a very, very exciting time.
Will that guidance say how much is discretionary, or like what the direction, how much leeway will we have?
It's a great question. So it's not immediately clear that we are going to receive that full sum in total. There was language added in the federal bill that originally mandated that it come in 2 phases. That language was softened to say the Treasury may issue guidance on 2 phases of payments. So we are waiting very expectantly for that guidance. The other pieces is obviously how can you use the dollars? That is also guidance that we are waiting on. However, the actual language in the federal bill is rather permissive. It is pretty broad, pretty open-ended, and revenue loss is specifically called out as one of the permitted uses. So we are expecting that hopefully the Treasury guidance won't be too much more restrictive than what's already in the federal legislation.
Both Majority Leader Feinberg and Majority Leader Escar mentioned the idea that in addition to the regional meetings, there will be sector meetings. Can you talk about which sectors you're talking to and how those will work?
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, so I think we'll be putting out a more detailed schedule and sort of who is going to be included in each meeting soon. But the idea about that is that there are issues that are regional. And so that's, as the governor said, we're breaking up the state into different regions for those conversations. There's also conversations and interests that are more sector by sector. And so that could be the tourism or hospitality sector, right? We know restaurants and those types of businesses have been hit especially hard, and the way they've been hit is probably different than the tech industry or you know, the outdoor rec industry or something like that. Or you know, we want to make sure these conversations are useful and they're not so broad that we just get generalities out of them, but we want to really get into some details and try to get the best ideas from the experts that know it best. So it'll be sector by sector. There's also going to be some breakouts for specific communities. We want to have a breakout specifically for the Latino community, a different one for the African American community, and really have conversations about how the crisis has impacted those communities and what we can do with this money to make sure they build back stronger and that they're included in the conversation in a meaningful way.
Can someone discuss how much of that $4 billion will have to go towards the state's coronavirus response, whether it's testing or vaccine distribution? And then also, is there any interest in spending some of this money to buy down the $1 billion that we owe the federal government for the unemployment insurance trust fund, which businesses obviously are going to have to start paying back pretty soon?
There is specific health response money that is coming to the state over and above our FEMA reimbursements for many of the expenses that we've incurred to date. Some of that is shared with local public health authorities. Some of that is deployed by CDPHE. It's expected that those streams of money around testing, around vaccination, around health support will be sufficient for that purpose. And I don't expect that we would have to tap either additional general fund or state aid for the health response. What was your second question?
Is there any appetite to use some of this $4 billion to buy down unemployment?
I would say, you know, I'm certainly open to that. We'll let different members and JBC members speak for themselves, but I'm certainly open to that. I think we want to. What I want to do certainly. We don't want to prejudge anything. We want to hear people's ideas. I expect that'll be one of them. I expect people will bring that up. It's something I'm open to.
Very much behind over the last decade at least.
Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, so you've seen us prioritize infrastructure in our state STEM. There's a lot of infrastructure needs across the state. I think what we're really waiting on is the federal guidance to make sure that as we go on this listening tour and we're listening to the values and the priorities of folks across the state, that it fits within that guidance. I think one thing to keep in mind is that it appears the feds are continuing to talk about an additional infrastructure package. And so I think as the guidance comes out, it will be key to look at how that guidance impacts infrastructure spending specifically due to those additional conversations that are happening federally?
It's a great question. If I just add, the word infrastructure should be writ large, and I think in the federal work that's being done, it is as well. But I don't want it to just be a narrow focus, but we also have needs around our K-12 public schools and their infrastructure, broadband, and lots of other infrastructure, water projects. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs attention, and I think the attention of our state and the legislature on that is important, and also this work that's going to happen at the federal government as well.
And I guess I'll take the opportunity to be a broken record. I mean, Senate Republicans, we want to get people back to work, kids back to school, and fund roads and bridges. If the federal stimulus dollars in this round are limited for use in transportation, it could mean, and I appreciate Majority Leader Fenberg discussing this before we started here today, the federal government may actually look at a separate funding package for transportation, roads and bridges. And if that's the case, then I could certainly understand waiting for that money to arrive before using maybe a disproportionate amount of this next federal funding, this round of funding for transportation infrastructure. But that is certainly one of our priorities and will continue to be. If the federal government comes with funding specific for that at a later date, then we would certainly want to be aware of that and hope to convey that through this listening tour to county commissioners, town and city council members, those who make those decisions. I always like to say the last time this body voted to approve a road or bridge in Colorado actually happened in 1899. They decide what gets done mostly, and we figure out how to pay for it.
Just one big picture question. When do you plan to wrap up the listening tour, and should we assume that what you learn is going to go into a package that will pass in this legislative session? Is that when you expect to spend the federal stimulus $4 billion?
Thanks, Ed. And so, we've moved pretty quickly to set up this listening tour. It's going to launch in a week, or less than a week on Sunday. I think the listening tour is going to take about 2 weeks, and then after that, we'll kind of compile all the thoughts about the listening tour with the expectation that the legislature, in collaboration with the executive branch, can move forward on ideas if presented through this listening tour this legislative session. Obviously, we're in the middle of that. Obviously, this listening tour is a priority, and we want to make sure that we spend the time listening to people across the state and then continuing to work in a bipartisan, legislative, executive, collaborative way to conclude the best path forward. But my intention, and I think the intention of all of us, is to do it legislatively.
You guys talked about some local officials participating. How about people who aren't elected officials, or how do they get in on that?
Yeah, so I think Majority Leader Escar talked about how we really want to open this up to people in those local communities, obviously local officials, but in addition, those important sectors and those leaders in those sectors, healthcare, hospitality, agriculture. There's a list of folks that we'll be reaching out to. In the listening tour, the way it will work is sort of a broad conversation and then breakout rooms remotely to allow those conversations to really flourish and to get as much as we can out of these opportunities.
There will be a report issued that consolidates what we hear, that members who weren't able to attend meetings and others and the general public will be able to get that. That'll be around April 19th, April 20th at the conclusion of the listening piece. That'll be written up and that'll be public to inform decisions. So, and then, as was also indicated, it's not yet clear whether this is 2 tranches across 2 years or 1 tranche, but there's certainly not the need to dispense with every piece of it in this current legislative session. The flip side of that is there's the imperative that some of it is dispensed with this legislative session.